Beneath the Neon Lights, written by Tane Blackadder. The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the city streets into shimmering rivers of reflected neon. The glow of the bookstore's sign, Daniel's Nook, flickered faintly in the storm, casting a warm golden light onto the slick pavement. Inside, Daniel sat at the counter, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose as he pored over an old, dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby. The storm had driven away his usual evening customers, leaving the shop quiet except for the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. It was then that he noticed her. Beneath the awning of his shop, a woman stood hunched against the cold, her threadbare coat soaked through. She clutched a tattered bag to her chest, her face hidden beneath the hood of her coat. Daniel watched her for a moment, struck by the quiet dignity in her posture. She wasn't begging or pacing. She simply stood there, as if waiting for the storm to pass. Something about her stillness tugged at him. He set his book down, grabbed an umbrella from behind the counter, and stepped outside. "Excuse me," he said gently, holding the umbrella over her. "You're going to catch your death out here. Why don't you come inside, just until the rain lets up?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting to his face. They were a startling shade of green, sharp and intelligent, but shadowed by exhaustion. After a moment, she nodded and followed him into the warmth of the bookstore. Daniel led her to a chair near the radiator and handed her a towel. "I'm Daniel," he said. "This is my shop." "Lily," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She dabbed at her face with the towel, revealing delicate features and a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "Thank you," she said. "Let me get you something warm to drink," he said, already heading to the small kitchenette at the back of the store. He returned with a steaming cup of tea and a plate of buttered toast. "It's not much, but it's something." Lily accepted the food with trembling hands, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're very kind," she said, her voice breaking. Daniel sat across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to offer comfort. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked. She shook her head, staring into her tea. "Not really. I've been moving around. It's been hard since—" She trailed off, her fingers tightening around the cup. Daniel didn't press. Instead, he said, "You're welcome to stay here for the night. I have a couch in the back room. It's not much, but it's dry and warm." Lily looked up at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Daniel smiled faintly. "I suppose it's because you remind me of someone I used to know, someone who needed help once and didn't get it." Lily studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier this time. Over the next few days, Lily became a quiet presence in the bookstore. She helped Daniel organize shelves, dust books, and even suggested new titles to stock. Her knowledge of literature and art surprised him, and he found himself drawn to her sharp wit and quiet humor. But there was a sadness in her eyes that never quite faded, a weight she carried with her wherever she went. One evening, as they sat in the back room sharing a pot of tea, Daniel finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Lily, what happened to you? How did you end up on the streets?" She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I was an artist," she said at last. "Or at least I wanted to be. I had a scholarship to art school, a studio, a future. But then, my brother died. He was my best friend, my biggest supporter. After he was gone, I just couldn't paint anymore. I lost everything, my apartment, my studio, my will to keep going. Daniel listened in silence, his heart aching for her. "I'm so sorry," he said. "That must have been incredibly hard." She nodded, her eyes distant. "It was, but being here with you, it's the first time in a long time that I've felt like maybe there's still something worth living for." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "There is," he said firmly, "and if you'll let me, I'd like to help you find it." As the weeks passed, Daniel encouraged Lily to pick up a paintbrush again. He cleared out a corner of the back room and set up a makeshift studio for her, complete with canvases, paints, and brushes. At first, she resisted, her fear of failure holding her back. But Daniel's unwavering belief in her slowly chipped away at her doubts. One day, she finally began to paint. At first, her strokes were hesitant, uncertain. But as the days turned into weeks, her confidence grew. Her paintings were raw and emotional, filled with vibrant colors and haunting imagery. Daniel watched in awe as she poured her heart onto the canvas, her talent undeniable. In turn, Lily helped Daniel see the world in a new light. She pointed out the beauty in the small things, the way the sunlight filtered through the bookstore's windows, the intricate patterns of raindrops on the glass, the quiet joy of a well-loved book. She reminded him of the magic he had once found in literature, a magic he had long since taken for granted. Their bond deepened, and soon they found themselves falling in love. It was a quiet, gentle love, born of shared pain and mutual understanding. But their happiness was not without its challenges. One evening, as they walked through the city after closing the shop, they passed a group of people who recognized Lily. They sneered and whispered, their words sharp and cruel. "Isn't that the girl who used to beg on the corner?" One of them said. "What's she doing with him?" Lily stiffened, her face flushing with shame. Daniel took her hand and squeezed it tightly. "Ignore them," he said firmly. "They don't know you." But the encounter left a mark. Lily began to withdraw, her old insecurities resurfacing. "Maybe they're right," she said one night, her voice trembling. "Maybe I don't belong in your world." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his eyes filled with determination. "You belong wherever you want to be," he said. "And if you want to be here with me, then that's where you belong. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Their love was tested again when Daniel's family learned about Lily. His parents, well-meaning but traditional, struggled to understand his relationship with a woman who had been homeless. "Are you sure about this, Daniel?" his mother asked. "You have so much going for you. Why complicate things?" Daniel stood his ground. "Lily is the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said. "She's kind, talented, and strong, and I love her." In the end, it was Lily's art that won them over. When Daniel's parents visited the bookstore and saw her paintings, they were moved by the raw emotion and beauty in her work. "She's incredible," his father admitted. "I can see why you love her." As the months passed, Lily's art began to gain recognition. A local gallery offered her a solo exhibition, and her paintings sold out within hours. With Daniel's support, she found a small studio of her own and began to rebuild her life. But even as their dreams began to take shape, they never forgot the stormy night they had met beneath the neon lights. It was a reminder of how far they had come and how much they had overcome. One evening, as they stood together in the bookstore, Daniel turned to Lily and took her hand. "You've given me so much," he said. "You've shown me the beauty in the world and in myself. I can't imagine my life without you." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "And you've given me a second chance," she said. "A chance to dream again, to love again. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just promise you'll stay. Always," she whispered. And beneath the neon lights, they stood together, two souls who had found each other in the storm and built a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibility. Subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so as not to miss the next story.